Hi, I'm Leah and this is FilterFree Photography. Today I'm going to be talking about the Jupiter 9 85mm f2 lens. So today I'm looking at a Soviet lens from 1948. It's the Jupiter 9 85mm f2. Some history about this lens. It was originally made in 1948 and it was part of the deal that the Soviets got from the Allies after World War II ended. As Germany was being split up, they got a whole bunch of Zeiss optic technical specifications, and the Jupiter 9 was one of these. So this is actually a Zeiss, I believe, sonar design. What they did is in the early days, they mass produced these using glass that they actually got from Germany. So very early versions of this lens actually should be just as good as the Zeiss lenses because they have Zeiss glass and they're made to Zeiss specifications. But as time went on, they continued to mass produce these, but with Soviet era technology or quality control. So you're never quite sure what you're going to get with one of these. Sometimes you'll get something that's as sharp as those original Zeiss lenses, and sometimes you'll get something which is basically unusable. To start off, let's talk about the build quality. So the build quality of this lens is solid. It's completely made out of metal, steel, I think. It's very heavy. It smells a little bit like engine oil, which is a strange thing to say about a lens. But it doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart or anything, that's for sure. It's very sturdily made. It feels like you could knock someone out with it. That can be a positive, but also a negative if you're shooting with a mirrorless camera like I am. Just because it's heavy and harder to wield, especially since I have to use a M42 mount converter to my Sony E-mount for this. And once you screw that on, it actually takes up even a little bit more room and gets just a little bit more heavy. So that's what it is with like the adapter in place. It's not too bad. It's about the length that you'd expect from an 85mm lens. Some things that I like about it are, first of all, that it goes down to f2. That's definitely a plus for shooting portraits, which is mostly what I do. One thing that I also like about it is that it feels that the focus throw is easy to control. It's very smooth. It doesn't feel like something that, I think this one was made in the 70s or the 80s. It doesn't feel like it's 40 years old. It feels pretty new. And it's easy to change the aperture and it's easy to change the focus. Also, the diaphragm has 15 blades, which means that even as you stop it down at every single stop, it's always just about a perfect circle. Not quite a perfect circle, but very close. There's a little bit of oil on the blades of this, but no fungus or scratches. So I think I got a pretty good copy. I ordered mine from RU Gift, but you can actually get it from eBay and Amazon as well. You'll see links below. So one thing that I don't like about this lens is that while it has this clickless aperture, it also has something called a preset aperture. So you can set the aperture to a certain number, say 8. I have it set to 8 now. And now it will only close as far as 8. So you know that it's at 8 then. But if you actually care about what you're taking on a picture by picture basis, it's not very helpful. What it is helpful for though is if you wanted to shoot a movie or something like that, shoot video with it. So I'm just putting on the lens onto my camera. You can see this is an A7 II. This is what about what it looks like. It's about the same-ish weight as the A7 IIs. So it feels quite sturdy with it. It doesn't feel super top heavy or super light. So one of the reasons this is a cult lens is that it's said to have a really interesting kind of bokeh. It's supposed to have a glow wide open and also just a unique kind of background bokeh. So I thought that I would go out and check that out. as you can see from this picture, when it's wide open at f2, it's basically, it cannot be focused. I've tried this 50 different ways, but as long as there's lots of light and you're trying to focus using focus peaking on your Sony camera, I was using magnification, I was using focus peaking, it will never be sharp at f2. At least my copy of it, I don't know if it's a quality control thing. It's the glow that was talked about online and in forums and stuff is so strong that you actually can't get any sharpness out of it. And that has a sort of artistic appeal. If you look at her skin here, it's almost as if it's painted on, but it's not ideal for some kinds of portraits. Luckily, when you stop it down to 4 or 5.6 or even 2.8, I'll show you some examples here, it suddenly becomes something that's almost as sharp as a modern camera lens. So I'm shooting this video with the Sony FE28 and it's about that sharp. It's a little bit less sharp, but it starts to get there at around f4. So that's an advantage to it. One thing that I do like is between f2 and f4, it still maintains that sort of special glow that people talk about, even though it's now being stopped down. So you can find a balance for yourself between sharpness and glow. Unfortunately, it's hard to tell exactly where your aperture was each time unless you're using the aperture set ring, which I never did because I wanted to be able to change it very quickly and on the fly. Yeah, as you can see at f4, it's much sharper. It still has a bit of a glow to it, and I like that. Something to note here, though, is that some of these pictures that I've taken are from quite far away, and that's when the glow really obscures her features. If you take a look at this one in particular, you'll see that some of the background bokeh is actually bleeding over onto her skin, which is something I've never seen before. I didn't realize that background light could actually bleed over like that, almost like little mini flare artifacts in the image. But once it's stepped down a bit, you get this sort of nice, pleasing glow over everything. For a lot of these images, the glow was too much when I was maybe 10 or 12 feet away. But when you're just a couple feet away and you're getting a really strong headshot look, the glow can actually be very nice because it's almost like a 60s or 70s vintage filter over the image. It makes the model look as if she's got fewer imperfections than anyone possibly could, and that glow isn't really affecting the clarity of the image because we're so close. It can't really bleed over and cover all of those features. So it's really more of a problem with far away imagery. So if you're looking at these images, there's two things I want to point out to you about the background bokeh blur. One of them is that you can often see a kind of soap bubble-like effect where you get these perfectly round bokeh balls no matter what's happening. Even in the farthest distant light through the trees, it's always a whole bunch of very, very busy bokeh, and that might be your thing and it might not. So it's up to personal taste. And another thing is that sometimes that softness to this lens, the lack of contrast in this lens, really does give it a painterly effect. It almost doesn't look photorealistic at all. It almost looks as if it's been drawn in some areas. And that's just maybe my personal evaluation of it, but sometimes the background leaves or just the things behind her very much have an artistic look to them that I wouldn't expect from a modern lens. So one last thing to say about this lens that I didn't like so much is that part of that painterly look, that soft glow look, is actually that it has very low contrast at wide apertures, and that actually makes it very difficult to post-process. So I almost felt as if I was losing the advantages of my digital camera through using an inferior lens at some point, just because I couldn't do anything to it in post. I really had to get the image perfect in the first place, which isn't something that I'm not familiar with, even though I do use a lot of vintage lenses. It was a curious feeling using this lens. Sometimes I found that I would get something perfect and beautiful, and the next second it would be something completely unusable. And so the number of shots that I kept, I really, 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 really liked. But the ones that I didn't keep, I felt like I couldn't do anything with them. So in the end, how do I feel about this lens? Well, when I first started shooting with it, I couldn't really make heads or tails of it. And after shooting with it for a full day, I have to say I still am no closer to knowing whether I want to keep it or sell it. There's times where it can be maddening, even using focus peaking and focus magnification. It can be impossible to nail focus with. And there's times where I just think that I got a great image and I got nothing. But there's also times where it gives me something that I can't get from any other lens. It really does have a unique look to it when it works well for you. So the results from today really make me feel like maybe I should keep it just because it has a unique kind of picture quality to it. And keep it in a box with my Helios 44 and other types of lenses that are really good for unique creative purposes that I can't get in other places. I often use native lenses, and I find that they're always very, very, very sharp compared to the vintage lenses, but they always are lacking some kind of character. And those characters, of course, are imperfections, and that's what some people on the internet will say to you. But I think that now we're reaching a place in photography where sometimes an imperfection is something that isn't really imperfect anymore, and is something that you might seek out for its unique look. So if you're looking for a portrait lens that makes people look beautiful in a way that you haven't seen in cameras for 30 or 40 years, if not longer, then the Jupiter 9 is a pretty good choice. So thanks for watching, and if you liked it, please like and subscribe, or comment below to tell me about your experiences with this lens. In the future, I'll be doing other Russian lenses, or maybe even some basic tutorials. So if there's anything that you'd like me to review, Russian or otherwise, please let me know. Thanks for watching.